Okay, this is another topic in the first unit of your syllabus. So we'll have a small discussion about what is light. Light, as you all know, it is a visible part of the spectrum of electromagnetic radiation. So we say that from sun, the whatever waves they are evolving, the energy is evolving, that is in the form of electromagnetic radiations, and the visible part of that is light. The range of the visible part is 390 to 760 nanometers, and we have studied that always the way these EM waves, they have a radiation as well as a wave as well as a particle nature. Okay, so these have a wave as well as particle nature. White light, it can be resolved into 7 different colors, which is called Vibgyor, right? And each color has its own specific wavelength. Now, along with this visible part, we have the invisible rays also, which constitute the spectra. They include UV rays, X-rays, gamma rays, cosmic rays, and the infrared rays. So if we look at this complete range of the wavelengths, towards this side you can see the wavelength is increasing, and towards this side the energy is increasing. So this is in the opposite directions, they are inversely related. So here the energy is increasing, towards this side the wavelength is increasing. So you yourself can see the amplitude. Okay, now towards this side we have the high energy radiations called gamma rays. The wavelength is mentioned, X-rays and UV rays. Then this is a very small proportion of the visible light, which starts from 390 and it goes till 760. And then there are the low energy waves, which include infrared rays and radio waves. So you have to learn this complete spectrum. What is the source of light? Sun. Sun is an ultimate source of light. Whatever energy is being generated in the form of light, it is from sun. And how it takes place there? Actually, sun serves as a thermonuclear reactor. Okay, in this continuously nuclear fusion reactions are going on, and nuclear fusion produces huge amount of energy. How this takes place? It's a fusion reaction, so two reactants must add. So here there is hydrogen nuclei, they add, and the result in the formation of the helium nucleus. And this, with this reaction, huge amount of energy is released, and that energy, that is an ultimate source from the sun that we obtain, that reaches the earth as well as other planets. The radiant energy produced so transmitted in the form of EM waves. What is solar flux? Sometimes you get a 1-mark question on that. Solar flux is scattering or filtering of solar light. So whenever from sun the radiations, they are getting emitted and they are reaching the surface of earth, in between there are number of obstructions in the earth's atmosphere. There may be the dust particles, there may be the clouds, may different gases, right? So the result in filtering of the solar light. So it is not exactly reaching as it is being produced, not 100% of that. So there is some scattering or filtering, and that is called solar flux. Now why this happens? I told you, because of the gases, as we have nitrogen, carbon dioxide, there is traces of other chlorofluorocarbons, then there is ozone gas. Number of gases are there in the atmosphere, oxygen, they are responsible for solar flux. Presence of clouds, suspended dust, smoke particles, water vapors, then layers of vegetations. When that radiation reaches the land surface, number of plants are present. According to their height, they will also be having the filtering effect. Then there are certain structures on the land like mountains, hills, the direction of their slope. So all these things, they are going to contribute to solar flux. It is about 8.36 per centimeter square. So we roughly measure it as 2 calories. And if we count it for a complete year, this is for 1 minute, solar flux, whereas for an year it is 13 into 10 to power 23 calories per year. It varies seasonally. So with season, if we have winter season, summer season, according to the temperature, the value of solar flux keeps on varying, as well as it varies with latitude and during the daytime also, because then also the temperature is changing. So all over we cannot say that we have a definite value of solar flux. It keeps on varying. Now, as an estimate, we say that 40% of the total solar flux reach Earth's surface. Okay, means rest 52% that is blocked. Only 48% that reaches, and from Earth's surface, 80% of that is reflected back. Now, how this phenomena takes place? This is a diagram in your book itself. So you can see here, this is a space. From space, the 100% solar radiation is entering. Now out of that, we have the 52% that is being somehow getting filtered. It doesn't reach Earth's surface. So how that happens? 10% is absorbed by the clouds. 25% of that is reflected. Then we have from the clouds, 17% it reaches the Earth's surface. Then we have 48%. From that 48%, 9% is absorbed by ozone, water, CO2 present in the atmosphere. Then 15% is scattered by dust particles. Out of that, 9% is reflected back, and 6% that reaches the Earth's surface. And 24% is the one that directly reaches the Earth's surface. Okay, so this is how the Earth is receiving 47, or you can say 48. Recently, it has increased. Earlier it was around 45%, but now almost 48% reaches the Earth's surface. And from the surface itself, 4% is reflected back. So this is how all proportions they are divided. So only that part is retained, whatever reaches the Earth. Okay, what will be trapped from that? What will be usable form from that? That will be the one which is being absorbed by plants for photosynthesis, for getting converted into the chemical energy of the organic matter. So only that much solar radiation is being utilized. Now this is supplied to the heterotrophic organisms as well, because we all know ultimately the first level is always producers, then the next trophic level is consumers. So whatever energy is, radiant energy, is being converted into the chemical energy by producers, that will be transported to consumers, different levels, and so on. So we can say that whatever sunlight is being absorbed by plants, which is being used for photosynthesis, that is supporting life ahead. So there is a quote for it: all life is bottled sunshine. Right? Means whatever sunshine is being trapped by plants, that is being provided to the different life forms on Earth. So indirectly we can say all life is bottled sunshine. Now we will study the effect of light. What is the influence of light? We will study it under different headings. So first is growth. So light affects growth. How? First is photosynthesis and respiration. These are the two important physiological activities in plants, and they are related to light. We know that photosynthesis, in this the light is must. Different wavelengths of light are absorbed for this phenomena by chlorophyll pigments, and then only the energy trapped is converted into the chemical energy, that is carbohydrates. Then for respiration also light is important, because for plants especially we give a reference of photorespiration, that is the additional one which takes place in the presence of light. Then tissue differentiation means how an organ is developing, a plant is developing, formation of enzymes, manufacture and transport of growth hormones, all these things they require light. Then presence or absence of light in seed germination is also important, because we all know there are two types of seeds: photoblastic seeds, for which light presence or absence matters, and second is non-photoblastic seeds, which are not affected by light. They are not affected. If it's present or not, they are not affected. Now photoblastic seeds, for them the seed germination involves light. So if they need the presence of light, then they are called positively photoblastic, like lettuce. But if they don't need light, if light is it's not their requirement. If light is going to inhibit their germination, it means it is affecting seed germination, then we call them negatively photoplastic seeds. Okay, so that is the role of light in germination. So you can see here I have given an example how the germination actually takes place. And this is not a kind of photoplastic seed. It is the example of wheat, which is a non-photoplastic seed. Then comes the orientation of plants, different kind of movements. What we observe in plants like phototropism, photonasty, these are dependent on light. What is phototropism and photonasty? What is the difference in these? When we have a directional response, see, it is growing towards light. So when we have a directional response, that is phototropism. And this is photonasty. In photonasty, there are, in response to light, see, these leaflets, they are just becoming erect. Earlier they were dropped, so they regain their turgidity and they become erect in response to light. So this is an example of oxalis. In this species we observe this response, photonasty. So all these are under the control of light. Then it has been seen that light is very crucial for development of mechanical tissue. If we don't provide proper light to the plants, then they remain weak. They are not strong. So for mechanical strength, this is required. The low irradiance can increase the internodal length and size of the leaf. So if low light intensity is provided, it has been observed that plants' growth increases because the internodal length increases as well as the size of the leaf. They are more expanded leaves. So there also the role of light comes into play. Then at high light intensity, more dry matter is formed. And we all know that productivity of a land is dependent upon its dry matter. So if there is more light, more will be the productivity of the land. And if the plant is able to generate enough of the resources, then ultimately for the sexual reproduction, flower and fruit formation is also enhanced. Light is required for this we have discussed earlier also, for growth hormones, their production and transport. You all have seen this light response where we say it's a collyptile curvature test, Avena collyptile curvature test. So we say here in if the light is coming from the one from where the light is coming, the hormones is translocated towards the darker side so that more of the elongation takes place and there is a curvature towards light. So it means translocation of hormones is affected by light. Then photomorphogenetic responses. The responses in which we say that slowly and gradually when the plant is growing and it is entering to the reproductive stage from the vegetative one, it is showing certain morphological changes. And all those changes, they are in response to light. They are controlled by two pigments, phytochromes and flavoproteins. And for their proper functioning, a definite wavelength of light is required. Okay, second effect of light is stratification. What is stratification? The arrangement whereby plants are arranged in different layers depending upon their requirements for light is called stratification. So we have discussed this in practical also. Depending upon the requirement of light, plants, they arrange themselves in different layers in a community. Like we have topmost layer generally constituted by trees, which is the emergent layer. Then there is different other understory layers, shrub layers, ground layers. So all these layers, that is just in kind of the settlement arrangement so that each and every plant that can receive sunlight. So if we are talking about, let's suppose we say that if we have a monoculture of trees, so all where the same type of trees they are growing, in that case lot of competition will be there, whatever seedlings are falling at the floor, because all trees they are of the same type, so light won't reach here, and because of that there will be huge competition in germination of the seeds of the same plant. So that is why the pure stands, they are not successful. So plants, they always have this kind of stratification where mixture of species they are growing and the light requirement of each is somehow met because of stratification. Okay. Now depending upon the requirement, we have categorized plants into these 5 types. So these 5 types are, first are called partial light demanders. It means plants which can grow as an understory below the top layer, and this generally includes, if you visit a forest community, then the common species that grow in this layer, they include Ziziphus, then there is Delbergia, then another common plant is Albizia, okay. Second category is light demanders. So light demanders means which require proper light for their growth, and in this category we have slightly tall trees like Bauhinia. Bauhinia is Kachnar. Another example is Syzygium cumini. Syzygium, G. Cumini. Then we have another plant. This Syzygium cumini is Jamun. Okay, so Jamun, it grows as a proper light demanding tree. Then there is another plant called Acacia catachu, from which we obtain Katha. So these, they come under the light demanders. Then we have strong light demanders. It means those plants which cannot bear shade at all. Okay, no type of shade is allowed. So they need proper light for their growth, high intensity light. And among this we have Bombyx ceiba. This is a plant which is having fleshy red flowers. Okay, a very beautiful plant. Then there is another plant, Tecoma, teak. Salix. Salix is willow. Delbergia siso. Delbergia siso is tali. Okay, so we have already mentioned here Delbergia, but this is another species. This is Delbergia latifolia. It's a small straighter tree. And here we have Delbergia siso, which is called sagwan, tali. Okay, next are shade bearer plants. Now these are the plants which can grow very well even if there is a low intensity of light. So here we have Butea monospermum. It's also called the fire of forest because its flowers, they are bright red in color. So in the forest area, from the distant side, they appear as fires. So that is Butea monospermum. We have another plant called Acer. Acer is maple. Then Picea. Picea is commonly called spruce. There is another plant, Thuja. Thuja, what you observe as Vidya Padhai, Thuja. It's called cedar. Okay, so these are shade bearer plants. And then we have heavy shade bearer plants. Those which need very less intensity of light, and this include Eagle Mamilose. Eagle Mamilose is Bel Pattar. Then we have another plant, Nyctanthus. You have studied this plant, Nyctanthus arbor tristis. And we have Xylea. So these are the examples of heavy shade bearing plants. Okay. This I have already told you that tall plants, they can never grow properly in the pure stands. Why? Because of the competition, lot of competition, the seedling or the seeds of those plants, they will unable to grow properly below their understory. Then the third effect is stomatal movements. Stomatal movements, we have observed that they are also directly, there is no role of light, but during last semester you have studied there is a role of blue light in opening of stomata. So there it is involved. Here you can see these are the dumbbell shaped and these are the kidney shaped guard cells, and this is how a stomata is opening and closing their guard cells because of the turgor movements. Then there is requirement of light intensity for full opening, though it's very less. Okay, sometimes even the moonlight is enough in few cases. It's just 250 feet candles in case of tobacco. So only this much of intensity is required for opening of stomata, and we have seen that red and blue parts of the spectrum, they are more effective in opening. We all know, and blue is the most effective. Light also has heating effect, right? So this may result in some kind of the stomatal closure. Why? Because it causes solarization. If the intensity of light in a light is very high, so it will lead to the high temperature, and that will lead to the plasmolysis of the guard cells. So when they are under plasmolysis, there is loss of turgidity, then those stomata may get closed. So light may impose closing as well. Then the fourth effect of light is transpiration. What is transpiration? You all know the loss of water vapor through the stomata in plant's leaf is called transpiration. And here it has been shown that we have seen here the leaves, from the stomata, the water is getting released in the form of vapors. Now high temperature increases vapor pressure deficit of the atmosphere. We all know. Then the air surrounding air will become dry, because of which the leaves are going to lose water immediately in the form of vapors, which is called transpiration. And this is how it takes place. So here the guard cells are opening, and these are the water molecules which are coming out, but they are not in the form of liquid, they are in the form of vapors. And all this phenomena, we have studied the opening and closing of stomata as well as the temperature influence that is under light. Okay, the last effect that we are going to discuss today is photosynthesis. You all know photosynthesis is a reaction in which CO2 combines with water in the presence of light. It results in the formation of carbohydrates and oxygen. As well as the light is very important, because this phenomena requires chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is a chief pigment required for this kind of reactions, and for synthesis of chlorophyll, light is needed in most of the plants. It's not for all. Like angiosperms, they need light for chlorophyll formation, whereas algae, mosses, ferns, conifers, they don't have any kind of such requirement. They can even synthesize chlorophyll in dark. And the wavelengths of light which are effective for chlorophyll synthesis, they are any range up till 700 nanometers that can be used for chlorophyll synthesis. So there is no particular wavelength which is required. Okay, so that was the role of light in photosynthesis.